Well, thank you so much for choosing Morning Live today. And of course, the news cycle just keeps on giving. Yesterday, the Public Protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane, ordered the National Prosecuting Authority to investigate if money used to pay former Minister of Sport, Fikile Mbalula's Dubai trip, were not the proceeds of money laundering. And she also found that Western Cape Premier Helen Zille violated the executive member's ethics code by assisting her son with equipment from the Department of Education. And then she said that the Treasury's Director General, Dondo Mokajane, failed to disclose a criminal record when he applied for his post in 2015. Meanwhile, the NPA has issued a warrant of arrest for Grace Mugabe, and a former CEO of Eskom, Brian Damas, has stepped down from the Eskom Task Team. Plus, the EFF are challenging the South African National Editors Forum in court. And to chat about all of these developments, we are joined now by Sandile Swana from the Wits School of Governance. Thanks so much for coming through.
Thank you so much, Sakina.
So quite a bit to sink our teeth into here. Let's start with the Public Protector and some of her findings, starting with Fikile Mbalula. And she found that he had essentially abused his position, but did not recommend any remedial action. Instead, she said what should happen is that the NPA should then also look at maybe conferring charges on him. So what's your take on that one?
Yeah, I think the reason why she could not make those recommendations is because he's no longer a member of the cabinet. So that remedial action concerning that cannot work. But certainly when you read the report itself, these reports, I mean, I've looked at the reports that have been issued, about 41, 56, 81 pages. So these are not very light reports. So even Mbalula's report is quite a thick report. So Mbalula went on holiday, which cost about 684,000 rands to Dubai over a 5-day period with his family on first class. He didn't even know how much the trip is going to cost. There was no evidence that he had resources to pay for this trip. So he asked one of the service providers in the sports sector to just pay for the tickets. And that is where the trouble came from. So now that issue in South African law creates a lot of problems for you. So that is why now Mkhwebane says, look, first of all, where did the money come from? So the Financial Intelligence Center has been asked to check where did all these monies, where did the money come from? Secondly, then the NPA has got to investigate whether there's money laundering. When you deal with money laundering, is you've got the money illegally and you're trying to make it look legitimate. And it is a very serious crime in South African law. So, yeah, that is where we are. So Mbalula, although he cannot be fired as a cabinet minister, he's certainly in trouble criminally this time.
With regard to the money laundering allegation, I mean, where, how? Is it as a result of this company paying? Is this casting aspersions on the company that paid? What exactly does that speak to?
The money, the first money that came out, it came out from a bank account of a company that was dormant. So it's as if the company is no longer in business, but it has an operating bank account, and that money was used to pay for Mbalula's tickets, at least about half of the 680,000. Then, when the story broke out under Eyewitness News, Mbalula then turned around and said this was a loan. It was a loan and he's repaying the loan. And then he produced some money to repay this loan. But the question again is now, where did this money come from? Because I think the Public Protector is not convinced that Mbalula took this money from his own personal reserves. So sometimes you do have this problem in South Africa where somebody tries to resolve a crime by committing another one.
And then, of course, you have the issue that the Public Protector stressed, not just on Mbalula, but on all of these cases, where she spoke about exposure, political exposure, and how that would open up members of the executive or, you know, be they members of parliament, et cetera, to this sort of criminality eventually. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I think it affects actually both cases that we're going to talk about. And as I read it, the way it is put there, even the way it's written in the law, it's actually that as a member of parliament, a member of cabinet, you must avoid exposing yourself to the risk. It doesn't even say that the risk must actually happen. So if you find yourself that this situation could be expose you to risk of financial compromise, you need to avoid that situation. So that is where that is where we are. The standard is very high. So you cannot say I have conflicts of interest that I manage, or I interact with criminals or bribe people who bribe others, but I manage it. It says do not expose yourself to that risk.
And as someone who works, on the governance side of things, she went as far, because I think she really was at pains to stress this point, and she went as far as to talk about recommending to the president that members actually get training.
Yes. I think that the training is very necessary. Training is necessary because what we are going to see, people like Mbalula, people like Jacob Zuma, Tony Yengeni before this and others, there are people who've already been going to jail for these types of things. And people need to know how you navigate that process of either going to jail or not going to jail. Because that is where we are now. The issue that you're going to be beating about the bush, I think that time is over. When you expose yourself to these risks translate themselves into crimes, and crimes translate to jail sentences.
So given what we already know, and I know I'm asking you to basically gaze into a crystal ball, as it were, but given what we know about the Mbalula case already, given what was revealed yesterday in the Public Protector's report, the Financial Intelligence Center having to do their bit, what is your take on the NPA and the chances of them actually prosecuting?
The chances are exceptionally high. I think that within 5 years, Mbalula could be facing a sentence. That is my view after reading the report of the Public Protector.
And then moving on to the Director General at Treasury, Dondo Mohajane. Now, this also very serious in relation to his position and the fact that he did not disclose that he had a criminal record. Again, your view on this one?
Yes. Let us be clear that the requirement here is to be truthful. So you need to tell the truth that you know that could be material to your employer needs to be disclosed. Now, there is a form there, I think they call it a Z83, that when you're applying for a job in the state, you must fill in this form. In that form, there is a direct question that is put to you. Do you have a criminal record? You either tick a box that says yes or you tick a box that says no. On that application form, twice, in 2015 and then later on in 2017, Dondo went along and actually ticked, no, I do not have a criminal record. He had two chances to deal with this, and on both chances he told an untruth. So the problem here is not even the criminal record. The problem is that you told an untruth to your employer. Secondly, the problem arises because if you are going to be the Director General of Finance, you are not supposed to be a person who's prone to telling lies, let alone written lies. So where he is at now, between himself and his employer, the relationship of trust, unfortunately, cannot be sustained anymore.
So that would have serious implications then for him as Director General in Treasury, which is a very, very huge position that shoulders great responsibility.
Yeah, I think the monies that he looks after are in excess of 1.3 trillion, which is more than 1,300 billion rands that he looks after. So you cannot have a person who looks after those sizes of money who is prone to dishonesty. So in the current climate, where the ANC is at, where President Ramaphosa is at, and where the DA and EFF and UDM are at on these types of issues, I think he will not survive. He has got very little chance of surviving. He will have to leave the job.
But what does this say about the vetting process as well? And I take your point, as you say, this is not as much about him having a criminal record, but about him being dishonest about it. So the vetting process, though, shouldn't it have picked up that he does have that criminal record?
The vetting process did pick up that he does have the criminal record. Where it is disturbing is that the person, some mislead with the state security agency, did find the record and then wrote a report that said that notwithstanding the criminal record, he can still be appointed, which was not her job. And Gigaba relied on that first of all to appoint, and secondly on an untruthful statement that Dondo had already disclosed this. Meantime, actually in 2015 it had never been disclosed, because Dondo's version was that when he filled in the form and he said no, in his mind he did not know that he had a criminal record. He discovered it later. And Gigaba's version was that Dondo actually knew at the time he filled in the form that he disclosed the record. But when you look at the form says he denied. And in the form, Gigaba said no. In the form, he had disclosed that he had the record. So clearly there was collusion between the minister and the applicant, as well as the vetting agency itself, that they wanted him in the job. And Nene came later and actually also confirmed the same thing that Gigaba had confirmed, which was an untruth, unfortunately.
It's all very, very murky. But we are going to move on to Helen Zille, and she was found to have violated the executive member's ethics code. And there, the public protector again outlining how a conflict of interest may have arisen. But what's your take on Helen Zille?
First of all, I would advise Helen Zille and the DA and all of them, including the ANC, to avoid a situation where you cast aspersions on public institutions, whether it's the police, the NPA, or the public protector. This is the simple fact, is that, first of all, Helen Zille's son, Paul Marie, approached in a social setting, I would imagine, his mother, which is Helen Zille in this case, that he has got this project which is getting stuck and it needs tablets and what have you. And Helen Zille said there are tablets that can be used of the state in the Western Cape. There is something like this. Now, the first problem is that this Mare is actually a teacher, an employee at the time of the Department of Education. And he wants to run a winter school, call it a summer school for revision, using the equipment of the department for an NGO that he co-founded. This is not a teacher writing to his employer and saying, this is the project we want to run as a department. It's him plus his NGO. They want to do this. So when Helen Zille engaged the Minister of Education in the Western Cape, it appears she did not disclose, first of all, in writing, so the record could not be provided to the public protector, that this Mare is his son. This Mare has got this NGO, which must be given this equipment without a tender or any due process of processing an unsolicited tender. So, and the third issue there is that she then, because the tablets had not yet been delivered to the department, expedited, intervened with the suppliers, and a politician is not supposed to intervene in any part of the supply chain process. So those are the three aspects that have put Zille in the crosshairs of the public protector. Well,
Helen Zille not wasting any time, indicating that she will be taking this particular report on review. And it would seem, just listening to her, reading from what she's saying, that she seems to feel that the end justifies the means.
This is very common. Actually, a lot of our politicians in South Africa have a very, let's say, their sense of governance and their sense of even innocence, and has got nothing to do with what is written in the law. A person forms an opinion and says, I'm innocent and I'm doing the right thing. In this case, she feels that the program had to go ahead any of these politicians can say, hey, the people who organized the arms deal, they can say it was for our benefit. Helen Zille's argument is that many people benefited. Most of these cases can tell you that many people benefited from what they did. But that's not the topic at all. The topic is whether are you still adhering to the ethics code of your position? Did you do it? Did you follow the supply chain procedures? Did you disclose this? Because now, for instance, tablets can be hired. If you're running an NGO and your project is short of tablets, you can go and hire tablets. So if you take tablets from the department and you use them without paying for them, for your project, regardless of how many people pay, that is a financial benefit. We can actually quantify that benefit. And if you are getting a benefit like that, it needs to be disclosed that you are getting this benefit. So there's a number of issues where I think she's going to have difficulties in moving forward with this.
We literally have a minute to news time, but I have to ask you about SANEF and the EFF and what's been happening there. So SANEF basically taking this case to the Equality Court for what they allege the EFF is doing in abusing journalists. What's your take on this one?
I think on both sides. On the side of the EFF, I think, particularly because they are young intellectuals, Africa has been destroyed by an inability to accommodate journalists all over, whether you are in Nigeria, Malawi, wherever. So I would think that the EFF has got to review its position towards journalists and be much more open. Journalists come in all sorts. Right-wing, left-wing, all sorts of journalists. But you, as a leader, you need to accommodate even the idiots. That would be my view.
Well, Sandile Swana, always a pleasure talking to you. And thanks to Sandile from the Wits School of Governance for chatting to us about the Public Protector's report, 8 reports released yesterday, and of course touching on some of the other contemporary issues as well.